You're listening to the Driven Introvert podcast, a faith-inspired space for purposeful introverts who are ready to step out with courage and pursue their big ideas. If you are an introvert who is tired of letting fear dictate what you do and how you do it, then this podcast is for you. I'm here to remind you that the life and work you've dreamed about is possible, and your unique personality is not a limitation to achieving it. I'm your host, Remy Roy, and I'm the co-founder of shepact.com. On this podcast, I'll feature introverts and others with unique perspectives on what it means to follow dreams, passionately build out ideas, and live a life that matters. Expect inspiring conversations, resources, reflections, and stories on faith, life, and work.
Hey friend, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the podcast. So this podcast is called The Driven Introvert for a reason. I'm an introvert and I'm really passionate about championing and empowering and inspiring and just really supporting introverts to be all that God has called them to be all that God has called you to be. But it's the driven introvert, not the introvert's drive for a reason, right? So 70 to 80% of the content on this podcast will be geared towards drive, towards really going after the things God has called you to do. It'll be presenting stories of people who have done that, ways that you can do that, and ways that you can get the courage you need, the support, and the wisdom to chase your God-given dreams. I'm encouraging you to live on purpose, to be very intentional about how you do that, how you follow your dreams, ideas, and goals. But 20% of the time, I will talk about introversion because I want to dispel the myth that introversion is a problem. I want to add to the general positive conversation around personality because I think people need to understand that introversion is not a limitation. The personality itself is not a limitation. Being an introvert is not something you have to overcome. It's not something you have to get over and be different and be something else, right? It's how you are wired, it's how you show up in the world. But if there are limitations, if there are things that are holding you back from being truly the person that God has called you to be, if you have dreams, goals, and ideas, you have things that are holding you back from going after them, then we have to fix that. If it's holding you back as an introvert from doing the things you really want to do, then we have to fix that. Then we have to talk about that and figure out the ways that you can grow and thrive and flourish and be all that God has called you to be, even as an introvert. So in this episode, I want to dive into introversion. I want to talk about my own experience. I want to talk about the 3 biggest limitations I've had to overcome as an introvert. I should say limitations I'm overcoming because I feel like it's a continuous process, right? Now, these things are actually mainly fears that I've had, but I choose to use the word limitation because I want you to get the fact that you could be afraid of something. It's not a big deal if it doesn't affect your life. If it doesn't affect your quality of life, if it doesn't affect how fulfilled and joyful and happy you are, then fine, right? Whatever. Say, for instance, you're afraid of spiders. Big deal. You see a spider, you're like, I don't like that. Get it away from me. That's fine. But if you now start to refuse to go out because you're afraid of spiders, because somehow spiders are out there and you don't want to encounter one, now that's a problem. If you're staying at home, locking yourself inside and not going out because of spiders, then we have to talk about that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to drive at here. If the things you're afraid of are now beginning to hold you back from the things you really want to do, how you want to be, then it's a limitation. It's a fear that has become a limitation, and you have to figure out how to overcome it. You have to figure out how to grow out of that situation and not be held back. So for me, the 3 biggest things that I've had to overcome is what I want to share in this episode today. And I'm going to come at it this way. I will tell you the fears. I will tell you examples of it, how it shows up, how it showed up for me, how it presents in people generally. And I'm going to share with you some of the ways that I'm overcoming it. So thank you for joining me today, and let's get into it. Fear number 1. I had a fear of performing, basically performance anxiety. Performance anxiety is a type of anxiety that is kind of like a strong or excessive feeling of fear or worry that is related to being able to accomplish something specific. It can be related to the fear of the consequences of not being able to perform well, not being able to do things correctly the way people expect you to. It's commonly called stage fright, and you would recognize that, right? Performance anxiety is a fear of doing something in front of people. Like people are watching, people are paying attention to you, and you have that fear that you're going to do it wrong. You're not going to say things right. You're not going to do it perfectly or properly. That's performance anxiety. Now, the very smart people at verywell.com have put these definitions together that I'm using here. It doesn't have to even require speaking or acting, just the knowledge that you have to be in front of people and something is expected of you can really send you into a tailspin. This certainly was my experience. I remember years ago when I was working a job at an airport. I was living in Lagos at the time, and my job was to be a cashier at the airport. I was supposed to just collect payments. People would come through, park their cars, and I would get the payments and all of that. And I remember when we were getting trained to do this job, there was a big machine. I think it was a printer or something close to that. I don't remember exactly, but it was a machine and we were getting trained on how to use this machine. And I remember there were like five of us who were being trained, and everyone was supposed to go through and do the same thing that the trainer had done on the machines. You're supposed to just go there, press some buttons, click click click, do whatever, and then it spits out like a receipt or something. And I remember just being so afraid. I was so nervous, so anxious just to press those buttons on a machine, because somehow in my mind I was going to do it wrong. And when it was my time to do it, I did it so fast. It was like hot potato. My hands were so fast going over those buttons because I was just afraid. Imagine, was I going to press the buttons wrong? Like, this is how bad my performance anxiety was. I have so many stories, unfortunately. I remember in secondary school, I was actually the vice president of our like body of Christian students. And I remember always thinking, like, who made me vice president? Like, who got fired and they made me vice president? Because come on, I can't even speak in front of people. I was so afraid. And I remember this one time, the guy who was president, who was my friend and somebody I really looked up to, he was not available at the time. I think he went on a trip or something. So I had to do the speaking that week. And I was nervous. And I really looked up to him because he was a good speaker. He would get in front of people, speak and motivate and, teach the Bible and just, he was good. And I always felt like, how did he do it? Like, I am not good at this. I didn't have that skill. I wasn't charismatic at all. I wasn't the kind of person that I felt like I could get up there and just say all these words. I just didn't like to do it. But somehow they made me vice president and I was supposed to do it on that week. I could not sleep for days. I'd been thinking about it. Like, I just couldn't do it. I was just so afraid and so nervous. And I remember I pretty much lied. I lied and said I was sick. I wasn't feeling well. And there was another member of the group who she was great at speaking. And I said, would you just do it? I'm not feeling well. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to do it. But what's going on? I'm like, I just threw up. I'm not feeling well. I did not throw up, guys. I lied. I'm ashamed to say it today, but I lied because I could not go on with it. Performance anxiety. And this happened to me every single time I had to perform in front of people. I had to do something. Being in class and answering questions was hard. It was terrible. I was a good student. I did very well in my classes all through school, but having to get up and answer questions and talk always made me so nervous. It just killed me. And this is exactly what I would experience, like the symptoms, physical symptoms. My heart rate would go up, my throat would get dry, my hands would be shaky, my voice would tremble, and I'm just generally restless. Now, I try to understand why this really happened. And what I understand is it's caused by stress, just all the stress in your mind and anxiety. It's mostly in your mind because you're afraid of what is going on in other people's minds as they're looking at you, assessing you, and judging you. Or maybe just the expectation that you built up for yourself, and somehow you feel like you are not able to meet that expectation. So in your own eyes, you fall short, right? And also in your mind, in everybody's eyes, you're not measuring up. You see yourself falling short. So why is it important for us to overcome something like this? I had to, right? If this resonates with you, you understand that performance anxiety can prevent you from doing things that you really might enjoy. And it can actually affect your life. It can affect your career. It can affect your ability to just thrive. Worst of all, performance anxiety can negatively affect your self esteem and your self confidence. And this was my experience. So, how did I overcome it, or how am I overcoming it? Because it is a gradual process. I remember I shared in this on this podcast in a prior episode. about when I was in the university and I had to present this project at the end of my final year, and I was so scared. And I remember I knew it was the Holy Spirit. It had to be God just, telling me this in this moment. And all I had in my spirit was just prepare as much as you can, know your material, and forget about everything else. Don't think about who's going to be in the room, what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, how they're going to look at you, what they're going to be thinking in their minds. Forget about all of that and just know your material. And that's what I did. And that's how I approach performance anxiety from then on. Number one, I would prepare as much as I can. And that's what I would tell anybody: prepare. Don't just rely on what you know, don't wing it. Prepare. Know the things you want to talk about, know what you want to do, have a plan. And sometimes your performance may be impromptu, right? You're not expecting it. You're just supposed to get up there and do something. With time, you will get better at even the impromptu demands on your skill or your ability. But the more you prepare, the more successes you have, the more confident you get. So if you have time to prepare, 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 prepare. Prepare your mind, prepare yourself, know what you're going to be doing, and just go for it. Number two, don't focus on yourself. Learn to look away from yourself. And that's what I learned to do. It's kind of funny because the more you focus on yourself, the more anxious you get, which is really like not the way to actually succeed at anything. If you're in front of people talking or presenting something, you want to focus on the people who are there. You want to focus on what you're delivering to them, not in a negative way that, oh, they're looking at me, but how can I deliver my best, give my best in this situation? Whether you're performing, acting, speaking, whatever it is you're doing, teaching, trying to show something, how can I do it to the best of my ability? How can I do it so that people who are here can actually get the value I am delivering or trying to pass across to them? I think when you come at it from that perspective, you take the pressure off yourself. Now you're not performing, you're delivering value. And that's like a mindset shift that is so important. If you think about it that way, I think it'll help a lot. And that's what I've been doing. Number three, don't take yourself too seriously. Laugh at your mistakes. This is something that has always been very difficult for me to do. I'm a very serious person because I want to do things right. I want to do it perfectly the first time. But now I realize there is no perfection anywhere. I just have to accept the way things are, learn from it, and move on. So, number one, prepare. Number two, don't focus on yourself. Focus on the value you're delivering. And number three, don't take yourself too seriously. Laugh at your mistakes. I think it's also important to figure out what you enjoy doing and are passionate about. Performing will come easier the more you are in your zone of genius. So, the more that I find myself understanding what my passions are, what my goals are, what my dreams are, the things that I really, really, really want to do, not the things I have to do. Yes, those things will get done, and I have to learn how to perform even in those situations. But the more that I focus on the things I really love to do, the more I can grow in that. It builds confidence. It helps you be more assertive. It helps you find your strengths, and performing will come much easier with time when you're able to do that.
Hi, friend. Are you enjoying the podcast? May I ask you a favor? Please take a moment to leave a review of the show wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews are very important and help other people find the Driven Introvert podcast. I'd really appreciate if you could rate the show and also leave a written review. You can review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Now back to the podcast.
All right. Number two, the fear of running out of words or not knowing what to say. Basically, social anxiety. So, social anxiety is where everyday interactions just cause significant anxiety, self consciousness, and embarrassment because you fear being scrutinized or judged negatively by others. This is kind of different from performance anxiety because in that is connected to doing something specific, right? You're trying to do something, speak, perform, or show something, just a specific activity. Social anxiety is more general. It's normal, really, if you think about it, to experience some shyness or some level of discomfort in everyday life, depending on what's going on, right? Depending on your personality, it's normal. But in contrast to just everyday nervousness, Social anxiety includes fear, anxiety, and avoidance that interfere with relationships, with your daily routines, work, school, or other activities. It's just having this general fear of you being constantly judged and scrutinized by other people. So when it comes to showing up in social situations, you don't want to do it. You find yourself shrinking back, you find yourself declining invitations to parties, not wanting to walk into a room where other people are. And I've experienced all of this, I tell you, I have. I remember years ago, I went to my cousin's house during holidays. I would go to their home, and spend some time with them. And then after the holiday season, I'll go back to our house. So I remember going there this one time, and my cousin, she had some of her friends around who I didn't know. So there was a big group of them. They were in a room, and I was supposed to just go in there and say hi to them or whatever. Well, I walked up the stairs, and when I saw that they were all in that room, I pivoted and went to another room, and I sat down there by myself. I could hear them talking, I could hear them laughing, but I sat down in this room by myself, being very awkward. After several minutes, her father, my uncle, came in. I could hear him go into the other room and talk to them. And he was like, "Why did you leave her all in there by herself?" And I heard my cousin say, "Well, she can come in here. Like, we're all here. Why is she there?" And I thought to myself, why are you here? Why are you so awkward? I was so afraid of walking into that room and talking to all the other kids because I don't know. Maybe they were going to comment about something. They were going to say something about me that I was going to feel, whatever, shy or confused about. Like, I don't even know. Maybe because I didn't know what the conversation was about. These are people like I don't know. Yes, my cousin is in there, but I don't know the rest of them. So, what am I going to say to them? Do we have anything in common? Am I going to be able to laugh at their jokes? Am I going to be able to say a joke of my own? Like, look at all these questions in my head. It made no sense. But that's exactly how I felt. I could not go into that room because I was so afraid. Social anxiety. So let's talk about how it presents. What does it feel like to be socially anxious? The very smart people at the mayoclinic.com have a list of things, symptoms, so to speak, of things that explain social anxiety. Number one is fear of situations in which you may be judged negatively, worry about embarrassing or humiliating yourself, intense fear of interacting or talking with strangers, fear that others will notice that you look nervous, fear of physical symptoms that may cause embarrassment, such as blushing, sweating, trembling, or having a shaky voice, avoidance of doing things or speaking to people out of fear of embarrassment, avoidance of situations where you might be the center of attention, anxiety and anticipation of a feared activity or event, intense fear or anxiety during social situations, analysis of your performance and identification of flaws in your interactions after a social situation, expectation of the worst possible consequence from a negative experience during a social situation. This was me 100%, like everything, everything. There's not one thing here that I can say, oh no, this didn't happen to me. Every single one. I was so afraid. People are going to see that I'm afraid. People are going to see that I'm not confident. People are going to see that my voice is shaking or whatever. I'm going to be judged. When I try to say something funny, it won't be funny, and people are going to think I'm weird, like the whole thing. So, how did I get better and overcome social anxiety? To be honest with you, like I said, it's a continuous process for me. I'm still overcoming, but I'm getting better at these things. One way that I'm overcoming is one, learning to interact with people. And the way I've been doing that is really learning about the world, learning about things around me, consuming information, reading articles, things that are going on around me, interesting things that I might want to share with people. Because when you meet someone, having a point of connection is always great. So now I have stories to pull from, something I read, something that happened to me, something I did, something I can talk about, and we can connect on that. Number two, kind of like the first one, don't focus on yourself. I'm learning to be interested in other people. I want to be genuinely interested in other people. So if I meet someone, I want to ask you what you do. I want to ask maybe if we're at church, for instance, how long have you been coming here? How do you find it? What do you do for work? What's exciting that you're working on? Things like that. And I talk about my own stuff too. And that way it's easier not to run out of things to say when you're genuinely interested in other people. So really getting out of your own head, which is something that introverts struggle with. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. three: the fear of losing energy or feeling drained. Basically, overstimulation. Fear of overstimulation. Now, what does this mean? Overstimulation describes when a person is feeling overwhelmed by sensory inputs around them. So, think any combination of sound, touch, taste, sight, smell, loud noises can cause this kind of reaction. For me, this happens when I'm doing too many things within a short period of time. So, think I have to go to the library and then stop by the grocery store and then drop something off at someone's house and then pick up mail from the post office before coming home to cook dinner for guests who are coming later that day. No, I'm not doing that. You lost me. And now I want to crawl into bed and sleep into the middle of next week. Like, this is a struggle for me. And because I'm someone who anticipates what's coming in future, this is the way my brain works. I'm already dreading how drained and tired and angry I will feel by the end of the day. So I basically want to run and hide. In the past, this kind of feeling has stopped me from wanting to visit friends, attend parties or functions, just do stuff because I don't want to be drained. I don't want to be overstimulated and feel like, overwhelmed. Now, the smart people at charliehealth.com, they have this list of symptoms of overstimulation: headaches, dizziness or lightheadedness, feeling ill, faint, or nauseous, increased anxiety and stress, irritability and agitation, issues with sleeping, emotional outbursts, difficulty focusing, restlessness, and panic attacks. So I didn't experience all of this, but some of it I did. Headaches, absolutely. Feeling anxious and stressed, definitely. Feeling irritable, absolutely. I experienced some of this. So for me, trying to overcome this, I had to do one thing. I decided that I want to have fun experiences, but I also want to get things done, right? I want to have fun, but I want to get things done. So how can I marry those two things? So every time I have to do something, I try to look forward to what can I do that can make this thing fun for me. Say I have to go to four different places in one day. I have to go to the store, like I said, the library, pick up this, do that. Maybe I'll try to look forward to something on those trips. Maybe when I get to the store, I'm going to buy my favorite granola bar and I'm going to enjoy it in the car while I'm driving from place to place because I know I have to do these things. And actually, in the past, I would just tell myself, I can't do it today. I'll do it tomorrow. And I remember this drives my husband crazy because he's like, why do you have to go out today and then have to go out tomorrow when you can do it all of it today and then just have, the next day to just relax? But in my mind, I'm like, it's too much for me today. So I'll split it. I'll do it today and then I'll do it tomorrow. But then there are times when those things really have to get done. So instead of just not doing it or feeling like it's too much for me and feeling overwhelmed, I will try to build some fun into that experience. So feeling drained and overwhelmed for me is a mindset thing. If I can find a way to have fun, to be excited about what I'm doing, then I'm not as drained at the end of the day. I'm not as irritable. I'm not angry that I had to do all these things because I had fun doing it, right? I read this article on LinkedIn by Laurie Milner where she talks about the fear of losing energy. And she gave an example. One of her clients, he had trouble connecting with others in groups. He dreaded team meetings and intentionally he stayed quiet to preserve his energy. His logic was that if he engaged in conversation and someone disagreed with him, it would cost him more to have to defend himself. So instead, he just stayed quiet. I know this sounds crazy, like who does that, right? But this happens when we have fears that have become limitations. He created the very thing he was trying to avoid because he didn't feel heard by staying silent and then he became resentful. So, in my case, I would anticipate all the ways that my energy could be drained and then I will stop myself from doing the thing I needed to do because I didn't want to experience that. It was like a cycle, a vicious cycle that was going nowhere. That's how I learned to overcome this fear. Like, yes, sometimes I will have to do a lot of things and I will be tired. Sometimes it will require being around a lot of people and losing energy and being drained at the end of the day. But if I can find a way to build fun and excitement, something I really love into my day, then it helps me to stay grounded. It helps me to not be overwhelmed. It helps me to not be so mentally tasked. Then I can enjoy myself and do the things that I really need to do. All right, so these are the three things for me that I've shared with you that were fears that had become limitations, and I'm learning to overcome them. Number one, fear of performing, performance anxiety. Number two, the fear of not knowing what to say, social anxiety. And number three, the fear of overstimulation, feeling drained and losing energy. I'm curious if any of these resonate with you at all. If you're an introvert listening to me, tell me, have you felt like this? Have you experienced any of this? I'd love to hear from you. I love the story of Moses at the burning bush. It really illustrates to me how afraid and unqualified we feel when we view life from the perspective of our fears and limitations. So Moses was at this pivotal moment. God was calling him to carry out the mission of his life, right? To lead his people out of slavery. And he, God, orchestrated this amazing moment to show him his power, to give him instructions, and basically just reassure Moses that he was with him. But Moses had objections, and they were all based on his perceived limitations. He actually objected 5 times during this conversation with God. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 11, but Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And of course, God, reassured him and gave him instructions, told him what he needed to do. And in verse 13, Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" And God told him what to say. He told him his name, "I am that I am." In chapter 4 of Exodus, in verse 1, Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me? Or they listen to me and say, 'The Lord did not appear to you?'" And the Lord gave him signs, things that he would do to show his power. He told him to, throw his rod on the floor and it became a snake. He told him to put his hand into his cloak and bring it out, and it was leprous, and he put it back and then it was fine. And in verse 10, Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." And the Lord assured them again. And finally, the last objection. In verse 13, Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send somebody else." Isn't this typical? This is what we do when we let fear consume us. But God is gentle and kind with us. I'm grateful for His grace. He's taught me how to lean on Him in those times when I feel unqualified to do the things He's called me to. And I know that whatever fears or limitations you have, if you lean on Him and look to Him, He will come through for you, just like He did for Moses. I should mention actually that not all introverts struggle with these things. Introverts are not a monolith, right? Some are shy, some are not. Some deal with social anxiety, some do not. So it's not the same thing. Just wanted to mention that. All right, welcome to From the Pod segment, where I share ideas and insights that I've heard and learned from podcasts I love and listen to. In this episode, I want to share the podcast Quiet, the Power of Introverts. It's actually not being uploaded anymore. It's not being released anymore. However, I think the information there is still so relevant. In episode 5 of the podcast, titled How Young Introverts Can Thrive on Social Media, Susan Cain, who is the creator of the podcast, she shares the story of a young man, an introvert who learned how to use social media to connect with people, to ask for help on his academic journey, and also to find his passion. I really love this episode because it reminds me of all the ways I could have thrived as an introverted child who really struggled to make sense of my personality and the world around me. And now, as a mom, I learned concrete tips on how to help my children, should they be introverted, how to help them navigate life in this digital age. I encourage you to check it out. By the way, Susan Cain is also the author of the book Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I'm reading the book right now and it's really amazing. She also has a fantastic TED Talk on YouTube with over 16 million views or something. I'll leave the link to that in the show notes so you can check it out. Okay, so here's my question for you today. Whether you're introverted or extroverted, special thanks to my extroverted friends who are listening right now, do you know the limitations that are holding you back from living life fully? Everyone has something. I encourage you to do the work of examining your own life to figure out if there are fears that have become limitations and are holding you back. Here's a simple way to do that. Reflect. You knew that was coming, right? Reflection is so powerful. Reflect and ask yourself these questions. When do I feel the most anxious and unsettled? What do I try to avoid the most? What do I try to avoid doing? I think considering these questions will help you unearth areas of your life where you might be held back by fears that have become limitations. And if the goal is to become all that God wants you to be, then those limitations have to go so that you can grow and thrive. That's what I'm doing, and I wish the same for you. So, I've shared some really embarrassing stories today, but tell me, does any of this resonate with you? I'd love to hear your takeaways from this episode. If you'd like to, please take a moment, scroll down on your podcast app, and click write a review to leave me your feedback on what you took from this episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Driven Introvert podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, please take a moment to click the follow button on your podcast app or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As always, don't forget to take courage, trust God, and go pursue your big ideas. See you next time. The Driven Introvert podcast is produced by shepack.com and Remy Roy, with content, editing, and strategy expertise from Candice Zakaria and Aishat Olarewaju. Want to ask a question or share a comment on a future episode? Email us today at thedrivenintrovert@shepack.com or click on the link in the show notes to record your question in a voicemail.
Hey, friend, do you know your strengths? I know you want to live a fulfilling life, right? You want to feel like your life is your own and not like you're in the wrong movie acting the wrong part. But do you know your strengths? Are you operating from your strengths at work and in your calling? Or does everything feel hard and like a chore? I know what it feels like to not know where you belong. And for me, discovering my strengths and really taking steps to deploy them effectively has been very crucial to helping me feel more fulfilled and excited about life. If this resonates with you, if you'd like to find out more about your strengths, I have a free gift for you. It's called the Uncover Your Strengths free guide. In this guide, you'll find tools, tests, and resources to help you find your strengths. There'll be space in there to write down your discoveries. There'll be reflection questions to help you dig deeper, and prayers to help you seek the Lord for wisdom on how to move forward. I hope you lean into this. I hope you not only download this guide, but also use it, grow, and be empowered to pursue your next steps in faith, work, and life. You can get it today at shepacked.com/strengths. The link will also be in the show notes. That's shepacked.com/strengths.